Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christian Walsh. And to start off my presentation, I want you guys to just think about what it would be like to be at a concert or a concert hall in the 1920s. So you'd probably be sitting down in a giant concert hall with a lot of elegantly dressed people, and on stage is an orchestra probably led by either Duke Ellington or Louis Armstrong, two people of the Harlem Renaissance. And then you're just sitting there listening, and the only thing there is the stage and their music. And now you can flash forward 50 years into the future, 1969, Woodstock. Where are you now? You're out in the middle of a field for a concert. There's only 6 people on stage. It's very muddy. People are not dressed very nicely. They're not very dressed elegantly, practically at all. And then you can flash forward 50 more years to today, where you see maybe a stage without an artist, where there's just a DJ, and he's playing a bunch of music, and it's all light shows, or it's all pyrotechnics, or it's all it's an act. And so that was essentially the beginning of my senior paper for my senior project this year. My paper was that the cultural phenomena and constantly changing social trends influence the creation of various musical genres and have changed the importance of a visual concert. So a lot of my paper I talked about how the jazz era evolved into the rock and roll era because they were looking for a white male who could create the African American sound, and that's where you got Elvis, and he was one of the first rock and roll people of the 1950s. And then after that, it evolved through synthesizers of the 1960s and 70s, evolving into what is techno and other different kinds of music of today. So because I love music, I chose music would be one of the best things for my senior project. And I like to play guitar, I love playing guitar, and so I figured it'd be a great project to build a guitar. And so my whole plan was to build a guitar out of maple, cut down a maple tree, as simple as that sounds, and not so much. Cut down a maple tree, cut it apart, make it into a shape, and then use a swirl or a dipping technique so I'd get a color pattern like that in the bottom page. And so that was what I did. At the end of my junior year, around June, I went up to Miss Murphy and I said, "Do you think this is a good senior project?" And she said, "Yeah, that sounds perfectly fine." So I went to somebody at work that I work with. His name is Jim Averzinis. He's played guitar for over 10 years. He's also built several guitars. He's a worker at my parents' store, so I work with him nearly every week. We're good friends, and he also plays in a band with Dave Harrington, if you know him from the middle school, the chorus teacher. Their band is called Strange Ways, and they play at Wood River Inn in Hope Valley. If you guys ever want to see them on a Friday night.
Christian, excuse me, that might be blocking the view.
Oh, yes, of course.
So thanks.
Is
that blocking you, Mr. Almonte, now?
I can put this right on top for you guys. So what I did
Sorry.
next.
Right on this.
Sorry for the interruption.
No, that's okay. So what I did next was I had to find a tree. I decided on a maple because it's a harder wood and it gives a heavier sound, especially if you're looking for a rock and roll type sound. That's the type of guitar or the wood you would use. So I figured maple would be the perfect tree. So we have a lot of woods around my house, so I decided that I'd just go in the backwoods, find the perfect maple tree, and cut it down. The first one we found was a little bit rotted, but I ended up finding this chosen one that I'm standing next to right there. And that was the tree that I wanted. So what did I do? I cut that baby down. That's a little loud, so we don't need the sound to see what's actually going to happen. So then once the tree fell, we brought the tractor right up to that back part, which is right here in the bottom, in the side right corner. And we cut it, and we let the forks of the tractor, we let the wood just fall right onto it, and we drove it right out of the woods. So that was a lot of help from my parents, which I should probably thank them for that soon, because without that I would not have actually made a guitar. And we put this large chunk of wood in the front of my house. It was 40 inches big, or tall, 40 inches tall, and it was nearly 20 inches across. And so that's because when we were cutting it, you needed to cut it vertically, because if you cut it horizontally, when the wood cracks, it usually cracks through horizontally. So if I cut it horizontally, it could have just totally broke the wood. It would have ruined the guitar if it actually cracked. And my guitar did end up cracking a few times, but it wasn't, because I cut it vertically, it wasn't able to crack, so the guitar fell apart, which was a big help from my mentor. That was a big word of advice that I needed to do. So when I was cutting, I cut this giant slab of wood out, and it was 64 pounds. It was 3 inches thick. And after that, I decided, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? So I just figured I will start drawing my guitar on for the next thing I do. And if you notice at the beginning of my presentation, I dubbed it Frankenstein's guitar. The reason for naming it Frankenstein's guitar was because there was almost a crossbreeding of 2 very famous guitar styles. One of them is the Les Paul, and the other is the Strat. Now the 2 major differences between these 2 guitars is that the Les Paul has the rounder fat bottom, and the Strat has the 2 horns on top. And so that's why I incorporated the Strat 2 horns and the bigger, rounder bottom. Just because we wanted, my mentor and I decided it would be very interesting to have a nice cross between 2 of the guitars, because I really couldn't choose one. So I went to a man who also comes into the store a lot. He's a customer. His name is John Chafee. He helped me cut this block of wood in half because it was a little bit too large, especially if I was going to sand it for a while. It would have taken double the amount of time I did sand it. So he also had a bandsaw. He had the largest bandsaw that we could find out of anyone that we knew. And the bandsaw helped us cut the rounder edge. And this is actually the one of the edges that I actually cut out. And if you'd like, you can come look at it later. After I cut around my body, we cut off the edges, the square edges, because it takes a lot less time, especially to sand it down. I used mainly a belt sander, which is just a large belt that just rotates round and round, and I just move the guitar around until the corners were nice and rounded. I did most of that in my own basement. We had a belt sander, but also Mr. McClellan downstairs in the high school had a nice belt sander, and he generously let me use it, which is very kind of him. After sanding, I decided that I really needed to buy the electrical equipment for my electric guitar. One of my original plans was to build the entire guitar out of maple, but after discussing it with my mentor, I realized the neck would have been the hardest part for me, because I would need to put a rod in case it warped. And warping is when it's too humid or it's too hot and the guitar just bends a little bit. And so that rod in there, if you turn it, will help it unwarp it to a certain point. And so that would have been a very difficult thing to place in, so we decided that we'd just buy the neck. So we did end up buying the neck, but I made it out of maple, so the entire guitar is made out of maple still. I bought all of these different equipment parts. I bought the strings, I bought the tuning pegs, the 2 pickups right here, the 2 knobs, and the switch, and the bridge down there. So the total came out, if you can't read it, it says $385.11. And so I'm still a little bit in debt to my parents, and I'm paying that off as I work at my parents' store. So what I did next was I decided to just fit everything onto the guitar to make it work. To make sure all the electrical equipment was like on there and it fit right. So what I did was I put everything on. I had to fix the this is called the picking plate, and it just protects. I cut out large holes with a Dremel here, which you can see in this picture. I'm just dremeling out the guitar, which is a little rotating saw, and I just cut 2 holes so I could put the pickups in. And I also cut a channel so I could put all the wires underneath there. And so this just covers up all the wires and all the mess under there. And when I originally bought it, I bought it for a Strat. So if you can tell right here, I had to fix this on my own. I had to maneuver this so that it fit onto my guitar, because the horn for the Strat, which you saw before, would come out right here, and it would come down a little bit off my guitar. So I really had to fix that. But it was something that was easily fixable, so I just used the Dremel to actually cut that out also. So I did a lot of dremeling within a couple of weeks. I probably spent 2 to 3 hours every time I sat down to do it, and I probably did 3 or 4 times where I'd sit down dremeling for 2 to 3 hours. And so I made a mess of the house. There was sand everywhere. There was just a mess, so I had to clean that up. After cleaning it up, I again put all the parts on to make sure they fit. And then I did the soldering of the electrical parts, which is still a bit of a problem. I'm still trying to fix that, but it's a work in progress still, which is nice. And it's something that I'm going to keep working on. It's not just a project for my senior project. It's a project for my life, I guess. And so after that, I had all my parts. I had everything, so I took them all back off, and I went to dip this guitar. And so what I mean by dip it, I have a video. This is just the procedure, and I'm going to explain this procedure in my video. and I put the video on YouTube. So this is, what I did was I took a 40-gallon bucket, which is basically a trash can. I filled it all the way up with water to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And what I did was I took paint, oil-based paint and thinner, and I mixed them together so they sat on top of the water. And then I swirled it with a little pencil. I just took it and I swirled it all around. And because oil and paint don't mix, they don't really slosh in and out of each other. And then I just slowly dipped the guitar in the water. And it came out to this paint job, which is, it was probably the most fun part of my senior project. And I wish it's actually something that I wish to keep doing. If I can find anything else and my parents will let me dip, I will. It was so much fun, and I thought it came out really unique. Every paint is unique about it. It's because you have to do each time you have to do it differently. And so that was one of the hardest parts of my senior project, was definitely learning how to paint this, because as the process in the video you couldn't really tell, but these are all my trial runs, as you can see, and some of them are very good and some of them are not so very good. And this is probably one of the best ones that came out beforehand. This was the last one that I did before I decided to go ahead with that. And I decided that those are the colors I'd like to use, just because I figured they'd match really well with each other. And so my learning stretch for my senior project was definitely woodworking. I'd never done any woodworking before, so that was something that I really had to learn. I had to learn how to use the equipment, one, properly, and how to make it so I didn't ruin my guitar body. I also had to pay attention to a lot of detail. One of the things I really had to pay attention to was this was a whole chunk of wood right here, and until about halfway through my project I realized I can't reach these top frets of my guitar, and so if I'm going to be playing the electric guitar, if I can't reach them, how can I play it? So that was one thing that I really had to cut out, and that was a pain, but it worked. So those are things that I really learned, and those are also could be called roadblocks. So another roadblock was determining which tree and determining if I really wanted to buy a neck, mainly because it was so difficult to decide if I really wanted to go further than I needed to, especially because this was a very hefty project. So that was a lot of my roadblocks and my learning stretches throughout my senior project. To sum up my senior project, I would really like to think about the fact that music is one of the most important things in my life, and it could be in anyone's life, and that learning the guitar was one of the best things that I ever did, and that there's never a wrong time to learn an instrument. And I would like you all to I'm challenging all of you to go out and learn an instrument. If you want to be the teacher that plays the harmonica, if you want to be the teacher that plays the piano, do it, because the kids will love it. I will now take any comments and questions. Thank you for listening.
That was great. I feel like I just watched an episode of how they do that, how it's made. That was great stuff like that. So that is truly a one-of-a-kind guitar.
It really is.
No other one out there like that.
Exactly.
Very impressive. Very impressive.
Is
Congratulations.
it a common process to, when they build a guitar, do they always take a huge slab of wood like that and carve it down?
I've never really looked up the process of a guitar. I really relied on my mentor, but I would assume it's the same process. I assume they just take those large chunks and they probably put it on a planer, like a planer. So they probably just put it on the planer and get it to the right thickness, and then have a lot more machinery. It's probably not as much handmade as this one, but it's probably the same type of process. Yeah.
Found out you're living in the dorms next year. Are you gonna feel like it's gonna be safe going to college with you?
I don't know if I'll bring this one, only because, I don't know. It'd probably be too loud. I would think that once I plug it into the amp, it'll be too loud. Right now, it's really muffled when I play it because there's something wrong with the pickup, so I need to go back in and rewire that a little bit. But I would like to eventually bring it somewhere other than my house to play. That would be nice, especially in the dorm.
All right, great. Congratulations again.
Right.
Thank you so much.